Before we begin, let us know where you're listening from. After the story, rate it from 1 to 10. Now let's start. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a vast fortune must be in want of, well, not precisely a wife, though his mother certainly believes so, but rather, amusement of the most diverting kind. And when one is His Royal Highness Prince Philip Stanton, fourth in line to the throne, a comfortable distance, one might observe, to enjoy the privileges without the most burdensome responsibilities, such amusements tend toward the extravagant and, dare I say, occasionally cruel. The season of 1815 had begun with the usual flurry of activity. Napoleon was once again contained, though for how long? The diplomatic corps would not hazard to guess. The weather was unseasonably pleasant, and the ton was in fine form. Lady Harrington's annual spring musicale, an affair so anticipated that invitations were traded like banknotes among those desperate for entry, was set to be the first significant event where marriageable young ladies would be paraded before potential suitors like prized fillies at Tattersall's. "Philip, darling," the Duchess of Moreland drawled to her son as their carriage approached the Harrington estate. "Do try to appear interested in at least one of the young ladies tonight. You're nearly 30, and your father grows impatient." "Mother," Prince Philip replied, brushing an invisible speck from his immaculate evening coat, "I shall be precisely as interested as the talent on display warrants." The Duchess sighed with practiced weariness. "The talent, as you call it, includes 3 baronets' daughters, an earl's niece, and Lady Amelia Thornfield, who plays the pianoforte divinely, and sings like a strangled peacock," Philip murmured, earning a sharp glance from his mother. What neither the Duchess nor her fastidious son could anticipate was that the evening's most remarkable talent would arrive not in a fine carriage but on foot, clutching a violin case worn thin at the edges, and wearing a dress that had clearly known the attentions of a needle more than once. Miss Catherine Prescott had not been invited to Lady Harrington's musicale. Indeed, her presence had been requested, nay, commanded, by Lady Harrington's spoilt daughter, Miss Eugenia Harrington, a young woman whose musical ambitions far exceeded her abilities and whose malicious streak was renowned throughout 3 counties. "Mother," Eugenia had insisted the previous day, "we simply must have Miss Prescott perform. I hear she plays tolerably well for a tenant farmer's daughter." "My dear," Lady Harrington had replied, more concerned with the placement of flower arrangements than her daughter's sudden interest in musical diversity, "is that entirely appropriate?" "Oh, but it would be charitable. And think how amusing it shall be to see her attempt to navigate the evening. I've heard she's quite pretty, in that rustic sort of way." Let us be clear, dear listener. Miss Eugenia Harrington had no charitable intentions whatsoever. Her plan, whispered to her circle of sycophantic friends, was to place the unknown violinist immediately after Lady Amelia's performance, then immediately before her own, thus highlighting the contrast between true quality and whatever crude approximation Miss Prescott might produce. And so, on this fateful evening, Catherine Prescott found herself admitted through the servant's entrance, directed to wait in a small antechamber off the main salon, and provided with instructions as baffling as they were intimidating. "You are to enter when announced, curtsy. Do you know how to curtsy properly, girl? And then perform 1 piece. Only 1. Lady Harrington is most insistent," explained the harried housekeeper. Catherine nodded, her fingers tightening around her violin case. "Yes, ma'am. I understand." What the housekeeper did not explain, and what Catherine could not know, was that her performance had been scheduled as the evening's entertainment of a different sort, a momentary diversion, a curiosity, something to be whispered about behind fans and laughed at over brandy. The grand salon of Harrington House was ablaze with candlelight. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic rainbows across silk gowns and jeweled stomachers. Conversation hummed like industrious bees, interspersed with tinkling laughter and the occasional dramatic gasp as some particularly juicy morsel of gossip was exchanged. Prince Philip stood near a marble column, a glass of champagne held loosely between long fingers, his expression one of studied boredom. He had already endured Lady Amelia's pianoforte recital, which was, in fairness, technically flawless if utterly devoid of passion, and was contemplating the quickest route to escape. And now, Lady Harrington announced, her voice carrying across the room with practiced authority. "We have a special performance. Miss Catherine Prescott, a local girl, will favor us with a violin selection." A ripple of confusion passed through the assembled guests. This name was unfamiliar, not one of their own. The prince raised an eyebrow, momentarily curious despite himself. The door to the antechamber opened, and Catherine stepped forward. "Even I, your faithful chronicler of all things fashionable and noteworthy, must pause here to acknowledge that certain individuals possess a quality that transcends station or circumstance." Catherine Prescott was one such person. Her gown was simple muslin, clearly mended and lacking the elaborate trimmings fashionable that season. Her chestnut hair was arranged without ostentation, and she wore no jewels save a small pendant that had been her mother's. Yet she carried herself with such natural grace that several gentlemen straightened unconsciously as she entered. Her curtsy, while not the practiced movement of a finishing school graduate, held a sincerity that made the more elaborate gestures of the tongue appear affected by comparison. Prince Philip's glass halted halfway to his lips. "Who is she?" he murmured to Lord Wentworth beside him. "Some farmer's daughter, I believe," came the disinterested reply. Eugenia's little joke, no doubt. Catherine positioned her violin, took a deep breath, and began to play. Dear listener, there are moments when time itself seems to pause, when breath is held collectively, when something unexpected transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. This was such a moment. The first notes that emerged from Catherine's violin were pure, perfect, and played with such feeling that several conversations stopped mid-sentence. By the 8th measure, all talk had ceased. By the 16th, Lady Amelia's face had turned the precise shade of the green silk cushions upon which she sat. Catherine played Vivaldi, the Four Seasons, Summer, but she played it as though the music lived inside her very soul. Her eyes closed, her body swayed slightly with the rhythm, and her fingers danced across the strings with a precision that spoke of countless hours of devoted practice. Prince Philip found himself moving closer, drawn by some force he could neither name nor resist. The salon, with its chattering occupants and suffocating conventions, seemed to fall away until there existed only this girl and her music. When the final note faded, silence held the room captive for 3 heartbeats before erupting into genuine, spontaneous applause. Catherine's eyes flew open, surprise evident in her expression. She had expected tolerance at best, ridicule at worst. This reaction, this appreciation, was entirely unanticipated. "Magnificent," declared Lord Ashford, an elderly gentleman known for his patronage of the arts. "Absolutely magnificent." Lady Harrington looked stricken, her gaze darting between her daughter's thunderous expression and the unexpected sensation her entertainment had become. Eugenia appeared ready to shatter like fine porcelain struck with a hammer. And Prince Philip? The notoriously fastidious, perpetually unimpressed Prince Philip found himself applauding with genuine enthusiasm, his eyes never leaving Catherine's flushed face. "You must play another," he called out, his voice cutting through the applause with aristocratic authority. "Yes, another," came the chorus of agreement. Catherine hesitated, looking uncertainly toward Lady Harrington, whose tight smile and jerky nod gave reluctant permission. And so she played again, this time a Bach partita that showcased not only her technical skill, but a depth of interpretation rarely heard outside professional concert halls. "Where did you study?" Prince Philip asked afterward, having maneuvered through the crowd to stand before her. Up close, he noted her eyes were an unusual shade of amber, flecked with gold. Catherine dipped into another curtsy. "I am largely self-taught, Your Highness, though Mr. Hadley, the church organist, has been kind enough to provide guidance when possible." "Self-taught," Philip repeated, genuine astonishment evident in his tone. "That is remarkable." "You are too kind, sir," Catherine replied, carefully placing her violin in its case. "I should take my leave now. I've already imposed upon Lady Harrington's hospitality longer than intended." "Imposed?" The prince almost laughed. "My dear Miss Prescott, you have elevated this gathering from tedium to transcendence. I insist you stay for refreshments, at minimum." A delicate cough interrupted this exchange. Lady Harrington materialized at Catherine's elbow, her smile brittle as thin ice. "Your Highness, Miss Eugenia is prepared to perform her pianoforte selection now. Is she indeed? Philip replied, making no effort to conceal his lack of enthusiasm. How perseverant of her. Miss Prescott, perhaps you would care to accompany me to the refreshment table first? And thus began what the Ton would later refer to as the Prescott scandal. Though scandal it was not, except to those who considered a prince's attention to a commoner inherently scandalous. Over the next fortnight, Catherine Prescott's name appeared in drawing rooms and gossip columns with increasing frequency. They say he's arranged for her to perform at Lady Pemberton's musical evening. I heard he commissioned a new gown for her from Madame Lauron herself. Well, I was told directly by Lady Winthrop's lady's maid that he visits her father's farm almost daily. This last rumor, I can confirm, contained a grain of truth. Prince Philip had indeed called upon the Prescott farm, though his first visit nearly ended in disaster when he encountered Catherine in the yard, sleeves rolled up, assisting with the milking. "Your Highness," she'd exclaimed, mortified at being caught in such an undignified state. "Had I known you were coming, you'd have put on airs and pretended to be something other than what you are," Philip finished, dismounting with easy grace. "I find that prospect disappointing." Catherine wiped her hands on her apron, unsure whether to be offended or flattered. "And what am I exactly?" The prince considered her for a moment. "Authentic," he finally said. "Refreshingly, wonderfully authentic." Mr. Prescott, a sensible man who had raised his daughter alone after his wife's untimely death, observed these royal visits with a mixture of pride and concern. After the third such call, he sat Catherine down by the hearth. "Cat," he said gently, using his pet name for her, "you understand that princes don't marry violin players, no matter how beautifully they play." Catherine's fingers stilled on the scarf she was mending. "Father, His Highness appreciates music. He's been kind enough to introduce me to people who might offer proper instruction. That's all." Mr. Prescott's weathered face creased in a sympathetic smile. "The way he looks at you suggests his interest extends beyond your musical abilities." "Then he shall be disappointed," Catherine replied firmly. "I'm not some novel amusement to be picked up and discarded when the season changes." But Catherine underestimated both the prince's determination and her own heart's susceptibility. When Philip arranged for her to perform at the Duchess of Moreland's summer concert, an unprecedented honor for someone of her station, Catherine found herself swept into a world of privilege and possibility she had never imagined. The Duchess, contrary to all expectations, took an immediate liking to the forthright young woman. "You don't simper," she observed approvingly after their first meeting. "Every other young lady simpers dreadfully in Philip's presence. It's exhausting to witness." "I find it difficult to simper while holding a violin, Your Grace," Catherine replied. The Duchess's laughter rang like a bell. "Oh, I see why he's besotted. You're delightful, Your Grace," Catherine protested, cheeks flaming. "His Highness is merely visiting a tenant farmer's daughter 3 times weekly? Merely commissioning her Müller from Vienna to provide advanced instruction? Merely boring everyone at dinner with talk of your remarkable talent?" The Duchess shook her head. "My dear, I've raised that boy for nearly 30 years. I know besotted when I see it." The concert at Moreland House became the most sought-after invitation of the season. The Tun's curiosity about the mysterious violinist who had captured the prince's attention ensured that no excuse, however pressing, would prevent attendance. Catherine, dressed in a new gown of periwinkle blue silk, a gift from the Duchess that she had initially refused until persuaded it was necessary for the occasion, felt as though she had stepped into someone else's life. Certainly these elegant surroundings, these titled personages, this golden opportunity could not be meant for Catherine Prescott of Elmwood Farm. Yet when she lifted her violin to her shoulder and the first notes soared toward the ornate ceiling, all uncertainty vanished. Music was her domain, her sanctuary, the one place where birth and station held no meaning. She played Paganini, a composer whose work challenged even seasoned violinists. Her fingers flew across the strings, producing notes of such purity and emotional resonance that several listeners were moved to tears. Prince Philip, watching from the front row, felt a strange tightness in his chest. He had heard the finest musicians in Europe perform, had attended operas in Milan and Vienna, had been educated in musical theory from childhood. Yet nothing had affected him as deeply as this farmer's daughter playing with her whole heart exposed. "She's extraordinary," whispered the Countess of Burnham beside him. "She is," Philip agreed, never taking his eyes from Catherine. Later, when the performance concluded and the guests circulated with champagne and congratulations, Philip found Catherine in a quiet corner of the terrace, her violin case clutched to her chest like a shield. "You're hiding," he observed, offering her a glass of champagne. "Recovering," she corrected, accepting the glass with a small smile. "It's rather overwhelming." "The attention, you mean?" Catherine nodded. "That, and everything else." She gestured vaguely toward the house with its blazing windows and elegant occupants. "Does it frighten you?" Philip asked, genuinely curious. "This world?" "Not frightened exactly." Catherine considered her answer carefully. "It fascinates me, but it also feels impermanent. As though I've been granted a brief glimpse of a fairy realm that will vanish by midnight." "What if it didn't have to vanish?" Philip moved closer, his voice dropping. "What if this could be your world permanently?" Catherine looked up at him, her amber eyes serious in the moonlight. "At what cost, Your Highness?" The question hung between them, fraught with implications neither was yet prepared to address directly. Instead, Philip changed course. "You must call me Philip, at least when we're alone. Your Highness creates a distance I find increasingly intolerable." "That distance exists regardless of what I call you," Catherine pointed out, though her voice had softened. "Surely you see that." "What I see," Philip replied, reaching out to tuck a stray curl behind her ear, "is a woman of extraordinary talent and character who continues to surprise me at every turn. The rest, titles, expectations, society's rules, seems increasingly arbitrary by comparison." Catherine felt her resolve wavering beneath the intensity of his gaze. This was dangerous territory, a path that likely led to heartbreak. Yet she could not deny the connection between them, a harmony as perfect as any musical composition. "Philip," she said finally, testing his name on her lips, "I should return inside before your mother sends a search party." He smiled, offering his arm. "She would, you know. She's quite taken with you." "The Duchess has been extraordinarily kind," Catherine acknowledged as they walked back toward the house. "Though I suspect her kindness might evaporate if she believed your interest in me extended beyond my musical abilities." Philip stopped abruptly, turning to face her. "And if it does?" Catherine met his gaze steadily. "Then we both faced difficult choices." The remainder of the summer passed in a blur of performances, meetings with distinguished musicians, and increasingly frequent encounters with Prince Philip. Catherine found herself walking a precarious line between embracing these opportunities and guarding her heart against inevitable disappointment. The gossip, meanwhile, reached fever pitch. "They say he's commissioned a portrait." Lady Huntington claims he was seen emerging from a jeweler's on Bond Street. "Impossible. The Duke would never permit such a match." "Perhaps as a mistress." This last whisper, unfortunately, reached Catherine's ears at a garden party in early August. The words, casually cruel and dismissive, struck like physical blows. Is that what society assumed? That she was angling to become a royal mistress? That her music, her talent, her very self were merely currency to purchase a prince's protection? She excused herself immediately, pleading a headache, and returned to the small cottage the Duchess had made available for her use during her studies with her Mueller. Once there, she began packing her belongings with trembling hands. This was madness. She had allowed herself to be swept into a fantasy, had permitted her heart to nurture impossible hopes. It was time to return to reality, to Elmwood Farm, to her father, to the life that was truly hers. She was fastening her trunk when a knock came at the door. Assuming it was the housekeeper, Catherine called, "Enter," without turning. "You're leaving?" Philip's voice, tight with controlled emotion, startled her. Catherine straightened, composing her features before facing him. "I am. It's time." "Because of what Lady Everly said?" "She's a malicious gossip whose opinion matters to precisely no one of consequence." "You heard?" "I heard," Philip confirmed, his expression darkening. "And I've made it abundantly clear that such speculation is both incorrect and unwelcome." Catherine sighed, suddenly exhausted. "It's not just Lady Everly. It's everything. This isn't my world, Philip. These past months have been like a beautiful dream, but dreams end. They don't have to. He moved closer, taking her hands in his. Catherine, I've spent my entire life surrounded by people whose primary occupation is pleasing me. It's tedious beyond description. Then you appeared. This remarkable woman who cared more about her music than my title, who challenges me, fascinates me, makes me laugh. Philip, she interrupted gently, I care for you deeply. More than I should. But we both know there's no future here. Your family, your position. Hang my position. The vehemence in his voice startled them both. More quietly, he continued, I've spoken with my parents. Catherine's eyes widened. You've what? I've informed them of my intentions. My father was predictably apoplectic at first, but my mother, well, she surprised me. She said, and I quote, finally, a woman with substance rather than just a pedigree. Your intentions? Catherine echoed faintly. Philip reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. I had planned a more romantic setting for this, but circumstances seemed to demand expediency. Catherine stared at the box, then at Philip's face, her heart beating so frantically she feared it might burst from her chest. This is madness, she whispered. Is it? Philip opened the box, revealing a ring set with a single perfect diamond surrounded by smaller sapphires. I love you, Catherine Prescott. Your talent first caught my attention, but your integrity, your intelligence, your unwavering authenticity captured my heart. Will you marry me? Catherine's world tilted on its axis. The court would never accept a farmer's daughter as your wife. The court will accept whomever I choose, Philip replied with princely certainty. Besides, you're hardly just a farmer's daughter anymore. Herr Mueller calls you the finest talent of your generation. My father gave his blessing when I asked last week. Catherine's mouth opened in surprise. You spoke to my father? Without telling me. Philip had the grace to look slightly abashed. I wanted to do things properly. He made me milk a cow before saying yes, incidentally. I believe it was some sort of test. A laugh bubbled up from Catherine's chest, breaking through her shock. The image of the immaculately dressed Prince Philip milking a cow was too absurd to contemplate. You really milked a cow? For me? I would learn to plow fields if that's what it took, he said, completely serious. Catherine, please. Say you'll marry me. She looked into his eyes, seeing not a prince, but simply Philip, the man who had listened to her play for hours, who had debated literature with her father late into the evening, who looked at her as though she were the most precious thing in his world. Yes, she said finally, a smile breaking across her face like sunrise. Yes, I'll marry you. The wedding of Prince Philip Stanton to Miss Catherine Prescott became the social event of the decade. The ton, predictably, spent weeks in various states of apoplexy, amazement, and frantically revised opinions. I always said she had a certain quality. Distinguished bloodline somewhere in her ancestry, no doubt. Such a romantic story, just like a novel. The ceremony, held at Westminster Abbey by royal decree, saw Catherine wearing a gown that combined elegance with simplicity, much like the bride herself. Her father walked her down the aisle with tears of pride glistening in his eyes. And when she reached the altar where Philip waited, she carried not flowers but her violin. An unusual choice, the archbishop murmured. It brought us together, Catherine replied simply. After the traditional vows were exchanged, Catherine raised her violin and played a piece she had composed for the occasion, a melody that spoke of unexpected meetings, challenging journeys, and love that transcended all barriers. There wasn't a dry eye in the abbey. At the reception that followed, the Duchess of Moreland embraced her new daughter-in-law warmly. I knew the moment I heard you play that you were extraordinary. Now make certain my son remembers how fortunate he is. I believe that's my responsibility, Mother, Philip said, appearing at Catherine's side and slipping an arm around her waist. Indeed it is, the Duchess agreed with a knowing smile. Though I suspect Catherine will remind you should you forget. Later, as they waltzed beneath crystal chandeliers, surrounded by the cream of society who had once viewed Catherine as an oddity to be mocked, Philip leaned close to his bride's ear. Happy, he asked. Catherine's smile illuminated her face. Beyond measure. Though I'm already composing a violin sonata about a prince who learns to milk cows. It shall be my legacy to musical history. Philip laughed, drawing her closer. I would expect nothing less, Your Royal Highness. And so, dear listener, ends our tale of the violin player and her prince. A reminder that true talent cannot be concealed by humble circumstances, that authentic character shines brighter than the most polished veneer, and that love, when genuine, has a remarkable way of rearranging the most rigid of social orders. The gossips of the Ton would later report that the royal couple's residence became known for hosting the most extraordinary musical evenings in London, where talent rather than title determined one's invitation. And if occasionally the Princess Royal herself could be spotted at dawn, dressed simply and visiting her father's farm to help with the milking, well, that was merely further evidence that Catherine Prescott Stanton had not forgotten where she came from, even as she embraced where love had taken her.